we make way more irrational choices than we thought we did, and we lie to ourselves and say that we're not doing it.
If you have survived the AI crisis, welcome back to Housing Insiders, the podcast for founders, builders, lenders, and regulators, and anyone who believes that everyone should be well housed. I am Jonathan Lawless.
And I'm Jeremy Potter, the real Jeremy Potter, not an AI avatar of Jeremy Potter, not an AI bot talking like Jeremy Potter, actually Jeremy Potter on Housing Insiders. These are the smart conversations with people in the know. We are trying to bring you actionable ideas that you won't hear anywhere else. Hopefully we do that today, John.
Yeah, we have a different episode. This is another episode where it's just going to be the two of us, but it's an important one for you to listen to because we're here to tell you that you are fucked. AI is going to replace your job. You are going to be on the street and homeless sooner than you think. And so we're excited because that's the topic. And honestly, this is coming out of something that many of you have read, a paper by Citrini Research following another paper or a blog post or whatever that I think Jeremy and I have been forwarded about 500 times by now. And you likewise probably have well. So anyway, we have been talking a lot about it. We have been thinking about how it applies to our industry and what it means for us and what it means for you. And so that's what we want to talk about today.
Yeah, if we only started with you're fucked because of AI, you would have already heard that about 10 times this week, maybe 100 times this week from this article and from everything else, probably vendors, managers, boards of directors telling you this or worried about this in your business. So I think today, John, looking at this Citrini research paper and kind of digging in to what was this thought experiment really? And we'll talk about that. But then also saying, what do the people in housing want to hear about? What does it actually mean to real estate, housing, and mortgage that you can make decisions off of this year instead of in 2028? So the thought experiment does bring up 2028, or I bring up 2028, only because that was the time period that the paper was theoretically written in. So something big is happening. AI is taking over. White collar jobs are threatened in 2026. Let's fast forward to 2028. And let's start talking about what the world would look like if the fears of this week came true, right? That was essentially the point. And some of those things, not just the stock market dropping on a lot of white collar backed industries or software SaaS type companies, but then also unemployment. What are the cascading effects of not manual, blue collar, working class jobs, white collar, higher paid jobs becoming the ones that get slashed for AI? And then, as we used to call it in law school, John, the parade of horribles followed in a very lengthy report for every industry, including ours.
Yep, that's right. And it was great to see our industry mentioned. It's great to see it mentioned. I mean, we're not talking about the State of the Union, which also happened in this past week, which housing was mentioned. I'm much happier to be talking about these articles, which are, I think, a really important topic economically. They're an important topic socially. They're an important topic for everybody, regardless of what you do. And it's great that, this article actually touched on some housing things that are important for us to think about. I want to start, Jeremy, with, I think, the key preface to this article, if you will, like the fact that sort of underlies all of this, and maybe just get your quick sense of whether or not you agree with it. And I think that key is that AI makes software and human intelligence worthless.
Worthless or worthless,
Worthless.
right? So, yeah, exactly. I mean, I think the two aspects of the recent AI craze that we have heard is the AI coding is making software much more quickly from both a back-end and front-end perspective, more so than engineers even worried about, right? Because a year ago, we would have been talking about engineers are out of a job because I can now ask Claude to give me code and then I serve it up to a senior engineer. We don't need junior engineers anymore. And actually, I think Silicon Valley went through a craze last year about engineering talent. This said, okay, we're way beyond that now. We can actually deploy programming and we can deploy it to do the tasks of two really high cost areas. The human intelligence you mentioned is these experts, these professionals. And then the other example is like business revenue generating software. And I'm calling it software. It's in air quotes at this point. It's just programming that works. We can dig into whether those are true, but those were the two key points. I just fundamentally disagree with the second one.
put the business model aside, okay? So just I just want to say, like, before we get into whether or not the economic implications of this statement are true, the question is, do you agree with the statement that I can build a loan origination system in 2 weeks that has every feature that the best loan origination systems have out there with zero experience in programming?
I cannot agree with that.
That's the question.
Yes, I can't agree with that today, and here's why. I've not seen, and this is, I'll say what I'm gonna say, and then we'll talk about it. I've not seen enterprise grade deployment for these things, and even though you and I can disagree that the enterprise grade I'm about to talk about is overly bureaucratic and mostly risk management bullshit, the reality is there is risk management bullshit, and there is this legal protection that companies need. So we're not there yet because of that.
But don't blur the line between stupid rules we put in place and the development of technology. The point is to develop the actual technology and the rule set and the workflow processes and the front end design. That is the thing that has become extraordinarily. And but look, I was a skeptic of this until this year. Like, I have now watched people on my team build applications that are incredibly sophisticated while on a Zoom call with them. I've built aspects of an application in seconds using Cloud Code. It is so incredible. And by the way, if you doubt it, just go try it. Like, I
That's right.
promise you, the biggest application you can imagine in your wildest dreams you can now build. Again, I think you're mixing a little bit of the business purpose and the business rule set that has to have person signing some stupid thing. Put that all aside. If I had to build the technology to do any one of those things, I can build that today.
So I'll draw a distinction here. You asked me about a loan origination system. Here's what I'll say. I do believe you could do a loan origination system that does one loan. I do. So if that's what you're asking me, could I do one loan this way? I do think you could build a system that can manage some rules and have the workflow for one loan. What I was saying was, I actually haven't heard from engineers and from technologists that they would trust that at any reasonable scale. So, is the question, forget the business model for a second, just literal scale, practical scale. So, when I talk to engineers, I say, okay, I'm going to build this and we're going to try it. They're like, yeah, just do one. I was like, what if I do 50,000? We don't trust it. So that's really what I'm asking you is one loan, sure. Prototype, sure. 100%. You can get a really functional program right away. But nobody I've talked to trusts it at like mass market.
Yeah, I think at this point, if it's not true today, it will be true in 6 months.
Okay,
And
that's
that's the
fair.
only thing I'll say. It's like, look, I mean, I would say last year, every software engineer would say, yeah, A is really good, but I have to go back and double check the code. Now I hear AI is good, it writes the code. And I'm sure there's always going to be some, oh, I really need to get involved to make sure this is right. And that'll take a while to go away. But I tell you, if it's not true today, it'll be true in 6 months. And again, this is my point. The intelligence, and I can talk about that one too, but like, intelligence and software are valueless. They are easy to recreate, easy to reproduce. If you gave me a list of the specs of Encompass, I can turn around and, okay, generate a prototype. But I'm guessing that prototype within a week or two of a couple of comments could be fixed to be perfect. That's the point I'm making. Again, I know there's a lot of other shit that goes on. Even people trusting it, right, is another question. But can it be built and can AI do it? The answer is yes.
So the gauntlet has been thrown down. Mike, you can come back on the show and tell us about your product at Vesta. But I want to stick on the technology point for a moment, John, before we move to the human intelligence or intelligence side. And you mentioned a personal example you had watching these things get developed on Zoom. I also had one this week I want to talk about. A Claude-based agent assigned to me that a friend built for his business. I gave this agent my login credentials to my mortgage company, my login credentials to my home insurance company, and I asked a very simple question. Do I have the right home insurance policy? Could I be saving money? That is a question that software has been trying to serve up as lead gen online, Policy Genius, these different sites come in and put in your information, will give you the assessment in a very complex and annoying lead gen funnel, candidly, as well as all the commercials on TV. In 25 minutes, with about 4 or 5 back and forths, This agent had identified exactly the three areas of my insurance policy where I was either overpaying relative to Michigan or could choose subjectively to change. And it saved me $3,000 a year in 20 minutes. And it was a
Wow.
Claude Code agent my friend built. Like, this is where we're at. And that, I think, underscores what you're talking about, which is there are entire companies out there trying to get you to click, call, text to get your quotes about your homeowner's insurance. And this agent did it for me in 25 minutes. I got a new policy. I saved
It's
$3,000.
amazing.
And
It's
I just did it
amazing.
for fun. I was just testing.
It's starting to dawn on people, and it's going to radically change things. And I was talking to a nonprofit that had a really interesting tool that they had built 10 years ago, and they're like, yeah, we're thinking about replacing it, but we have to figure out the right technology partner to do it. I'm like, what are you fucking talking about? Just have one of your junior analysts go on Cloud Code, tell it what you want it to do, and it'll be done. But like, once people get that, to this point, I just think that incremental thing has been radically disrupted. And if you listen to anything I say today, if you're listening to this and you haven't gone out and tried this, or if you don't believe me, you gotta believe me. You got to go do this. You got to see it for yourself. This is the way things are today. The question is, what does it mean for us in the future?
Okay, so now let's go to the second point you made, which is, all right, here's the capability. Here's what we're looking at from a technology perspective, and here's what we believe technology is capable of. I think where we disagree is what happens next, because we haven't seen technology adoption at such a scale that didn't create other opportunities that were then capitalized that reshuffled the whole economy. So I think the question here is, or at least the question I'm going to ask you is, when you talk about human intelligence being worthless or intelligence being worthless, aren't you leaving out the reshuffling of the economy that happens every time something like this happens? What's different now?
Yeah, it's a good question. I want to separate two things. First, to just make the point about intelligence, I spent most of my life at a GSE, most of my time there thinking about GSE pricing. Okay. I consider myself one of a handful of absolute experts in this space, both how the math gets done and how it should be done, how it's executed. I thought, well, let me see how good Claude is. Claude is better at me now at this. Not better. Okay. Let me say Claude is 95% of the way there. I was blown away by how much Claude knew or could figure out without any prompting or training from my side. Okay. So when I say intelligence has lost value, I look at my own self and the value I can bring to a company and the background and knowledge I have. And Claude can answer most of the questions I can answer. So I imagine that means that I have less value. But I think the question you're asking is, how does that translate into whether or not I still keep a job? Like, what actually happens? And that leads to a broader question, which is, technology has rapidly been advancing. We we've seen the internet, right? We've seen the ability to do loans online versus doing loans in person. And not only are there not fewer places to go, like there's more. Like in some way, there's been this perverse way in which introductions of technology into certain spaces that have made certain things easier have actually resulted in more of those things being done, which created more jobs. And I think maybe that's kind of the point you're trying to make, which is maybe we displace a few things, but we create all these other things that create these new industries. Now banks aren't doing loans, but we have independent mortgage banks, and that's what happens.
I think that's a really great way to think about it, because there seems to be an assumption that once AI can do this, and this in the paper at least, and what brought us to talking about it today was what roles in the real estate and housing industry can AI do today or will be able to do in the next 6 months, as you said. And so as soon as that happens, those jobs go away because every company maximizes for cost efficiency. So they're going to get rid of costs as quickly as they can, and then that's the story. And I think what I've seen is a lot of companies are completely irrational when it comes to cost, particularly in the mortgage industry, particularly in the real estate industry. So I actually don't think that it follows that all these companies are going to immediately do this brilliant cost savings thing, because they haven't yet. So why would all of a
That's right.
sudden why would they all of a sudden get this economic rationality that they haven't had to date?
Yeah. So I think to make a statement, in a purely rational, efficient, competitive market, everybody is fucked. Again, if all those things are true and all these things have lost their value, there's no reason to hire and maintain these things. Like these all should go away. And I think you're saying you have a hypothesis that that's not going to happen. Part of your hypothesis is because companies are irrational. And by the way, one of my favorite books, and if you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. Bullshit Jobs by anthropologist David Graeber surveys all of these white collar workers, and 40% of white collar workers say, my job adds zero value. And he spends the whole book trying to figure out why in the hell do so many people employ so many other people who add zero value. And it's a really interesting study of the sort of sociology of enterprises and organizations that sort of create these jobs that literally add no value. So again, irrationality, I think, is I don't think that radical a claim, and I think you're right. We are not rational enough to really adopt AI the way that we should.
And I think there's actually some hope in that. So, what I mean is, we are all trying to get to a better job, a better process, a more efficient company. So, I want to keep that at the center of what we talk about. How do we get there and what's going to get us there? But I think there's actually a lot to say for delegating to technology. So, that's where, when I read this piece, John, I actually saw it as the laundry list of things not getting done in this industry, the laundry list of things you wish you could have worked on at Fannie Mae had you had something intelligent to delegate to besides a person that would make you more effective, right? You can always delegate and raise up other leaders. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about something that you can rely on to help you do your job to raise you up. What I'm suggesting is the article and a lot of the panic we felt this week left out the laundry list of things not getting done that should be getting done and didn't address whether AI can help us with those. And so that is an example of what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I mean, Jeremy, I always love your optimism and your positive thinking in this space. I to make a very very provocative claim. I think the vast majority of what we do in housing finance is not about creating value. It's about preserving who gets paid. Okay? If that's the case, organizations aren't set up to free people to go and create more value leveraging AI. They are set up to protect the value that they get today, protect their rent. And if they leverage AI to do that, great. What they'll do is build 12 more compliance systems using AI to make it more difficult for me to get anything done at Fannie Mae if I were still there.
Yeah, right. So I think that's a great way to articulate what we really need to be talking about here. I mentioned that companies are not rational when it comes to the cost side of the business. This is why they are irrational in a selfish way that is good for their people in order to be protectionist. That's what we're talking about. We're just talking about one of the most protectionist industries that there has been, and they've been very good at it.
100%.
I think that what we're talking about here is, will AI expose that? Because we've been talking about it for 10 years. It's now provable in the data. It's now provable in numbers in a way that was just conjecture. And at times, honestly, John, it felt like you and I were yelling at the wind, shouting at the fucking wind, because it was like, oh yeah, we're telling the people who are stand to lose market share that they should change. Why would they do that? And so now we're talking about a system, and I'm talking about AI as like systems thinking, a system that can come on top of that and actually shine a bright light on something that we've been trying to measure for a while.
Yeah, I mean, I love the way you frame that. And if I had to give a predict, I can't give a prediction that's going to happen tonight. People are saying what's going to happen next 5 years is crazy. But look, what I will tell you is, in 5 years, we will know one thing. We will know whether or not our industry has chosen consumers or has chosen to protect the incumbents. We will know that because AI is forcing and exposing that choice. And technology has forced that choice in the past. I'll give an example of where our industry's protectionism is so powerful, right? The second the internet came online and you could list homes in a digital format where everybody could go and see and look at homes, that should have disrupted the realtor space immeasurably. Okay? It didn't. And the company that started that is now a realtor serving company because it was so impossible to change the way that realtors would work, the way that consumers would shop for homes. It wasn't a huge technology. I mean, there was a lot of technology that kind of went behind what Zillow created, but Zillow is a great example of how a technology should have made it much cheaper for people to go and buy and sell homes, but it ended up not having that effect. And then we get a lawsuit that should have really moved those rules of change. We still haven't seen any changes. This is a well-entrenched, protected part of our industry. I just don't see how AI changes that.
I think that's a good example to start on. So in this industry, we have a couple of things going on here. One, we can say, and often you'd hear people inside the industry question whether real estate agents deserve their compensation, deserve their commission. And my answer always was yes, because the buyer, the seller, are willing to pay that commission for the emotional value they get because they're attributing it to something other than the role. To your point, the internet, and now AI even more so, can address that role based problem, but it didn't ever address this like unmeasurable trust based. I just want to feel better at the end of the day, even if it costs me money. I just want to feel better. And we know that applies to all kinds of other areas of our consumer lives. So it's not shocking that it would apply to the real estate question. I think what I'm really interested in here is, does AI force a consumer decision further up before they're insecure to need that reassurance? That actually is where the real estate agent should be most nervous, is once you're in the funnel, you are scared, insecure, feeling like you're not educated, things are happening behind the curtain, all of the things you've heard us reference on other episodes with Kristen Messerly and others about trust and about the consumer sentiment. Where AI is threatening to real estate agents, in my opinion, is getting above that and giving consumers confidence, all the information, and maybe even shopping on their behalf to where they never even feel the insecurity in the first place. And that actually, that change to consumer shopping will disrupt everything, to your point.
That is right. A very simple precept is that if technology removes friction and that collapses your business model, then your business model was friction.
Yeah.
And I think in this case, the friction of consumers not knowing how pricing works, you're right. Consumers are willing to pay it for this sort of emotional thing because they don't know that they're doing that. They don't have any transparency. What am I paying for? How am I paying for it? They have no idea. And to your point, if AI were to disrupt that and make it very clear to consumers, like, this realtor giving you their shoulder to cry on is why you're paying them $20,000 to close on this home. Like, what the fuck? Like, there's an alternative. It would cost you $5 to use this tool and have somebody from DoorDash show you the home. Like, again, I'm and not to shit on realtors. I know and love many of them, but in any case, I just, it's this price discovery, to your point, that is not really available. And if it were, it destroys the model.
Yeah, if you're a real estate agent listening to this and rolling your eyes, this is actually the perception that we're referring to. So I get it. I understand why you're rolling your eyes. I understand why you've been threatened before and believe that this won't change anything. And my point is, you're probably right, unless the consumer's no longer doing the shopping. Like, that's kind of what I'm getting at, is if the AI agent who represents the consumer's thinking and best interest is the one shopping the market, similar to my example earlier of homeowners insurance was just a microcosm, just a tiny little momentary example that I attempted. But if I had an agent that did my shopping for me,
Right.
and now they're the ones picking the real estate agent. They're the ones picking the platform. They're the ones understanding what the value is that you talked about. That is a different experience. And that's what we're saying here, is how are you going to think about your identity and your brand in a market where that person you thought was shopping might not actually be the one shopping anymore? And I think that's the type of stuff that really gets some of these digital tools moving forward. I understand it makes people nervous, but those are the conversations innovators should be having if we really want to meet consumers where they're going to be soon.
That's a very important clarification. It's not about necessarily about price transparency. It's about the agency really being handed off from the consumer to something that will always make a very rational and efficient price decision, which I think is a big part of what the Citrini research kind of talks a little bit about, is that once an AI agent is shopping on behalf of the consumer, all the narratives go to hell. They don't matter anymore. When I was kind of thinking about these barriers, like, clearly with NAR and with the MLS, there's a regulatory constraint that prevents this shopping from happening. Only certain people have access. That's sort of generated by charter. You kind of point to another interesting one, which is kind of this narrative control one that AI agents overcome. But, like, I'll give you an example. Like, most people, most humans do not have the taste capacity to differentiate between a 20 and a 50 and $100 bottle of wine. You just can't do it. Okay. but you still feel really great when you buy a $50 bottle of wine and like you're getting great wine and it tastes better to you in your mind. And the sommelier is a very important sort of person who's navigating that. Look, every piece of evidence says it's all bullshit, but like we still have this narrative that we reinforce. And so the question is, if that narrative of realtors is that, look, no AI is ever going to tell you exactly the real character of this neighborhood. I know people who live here. You can never get a robot to figure that out for you, right? That's a narrative thing that needs to be overcome. But if that narrative it doesn't have a chance to be expressed, if you have an agent saying, "Well, that's great. I'm glad to hear that, but I'm still going to buy this house." You know what I mean? Like anyway, but the narrative, even like sort of fear mongering, is kind of another part of that perception that I think protects a lot of aspects of our industry. But AI is just going to just wipe that clean.
I agree. I think that so I've been fighting the urge to get too sort of philosophical or get too far down the behavioral economics here because that's what will play out. That's what we'll be keeping an eye on, and that's what
Right.
people in our industry will have to watch to make decisions. But I do think this ties in to the panic and fear that you just referenced about white collar jobs disappearing, white collar jobs going away. And I just want to float this idea, John. Tell me if it's too far out there, which is I think we are underestimating the role that personal identity, like your likeness and image, is going to play in this future facing market that we just described about real estate, but also exists for white collar employees. Let me tell you what I'm talking about. So the NCAA had to go through a painful legal process to finally admit that college athletes had a right to their own likeness and that they could contract for that likeness with brands or advertisers or whatever. Now, there's a whole bunch of other student athlete stuff we don't need to talk about. Let's just talk about the likeness. If I was a real estate agent and I understood the trends you just described, wouldn't I just create the digital version of me to assist along the way so that I just made, because I want 100 of me in the community. I still want to know about the community. I still want to feed in that very key, very personal information that only my observations kind of merge with the market, but I want it to be available in a way that I'm 100 times more efficient. So, isn't what we're talking about here? We already know. Let me give you some data and then I'll give you the pitch. The data is 15% of the agents do 85% of the business, might even be, I think, 10% of the agents do 90% of the business. Whatever that number is, the point is who's going to lose their job isn't doing the job anyway. The people who are doing the right in a real way, the people who are doing the job in a real way now become, I think, way more valuable because they're actually going to be able to replicate their knowledge across tools at a very low cost that make them feel universal, that make them feel as big as Rocket by themselves. And that difference in the market is what is going to end up dictating how this plays out, at least from the consumer real estate side, in a way that's, I think, much more interesting than just focusing on 1,000 people who did one loan a year or did one house a year and then claiming we lost 1,000 jobs. Not really. If you were doing one loan a year or one house a year on the real estate or mortgage side. So, what I'm getting at is let's talk about who's really doing the work. And then let's say, imagine a scenario where their likeness becomes ubiquitous. Imagine a scenario where an individual real estate agent is able to flood the market in a way they never were before, and you get a personalized version of them. I don't know how that's possible. I'm not here to pitch the technology side of that, but we'd be having a totally different conversation if we just open our mind a little bit to what's likely to happen to this resilient group that is used to finding a way creatively to help people in the market.
Yeah, but I wonder. I mean, I don't know if this is the point that you're making, but 10% are doing 90%. Like at some point, the 0.1% who have the best AI and most distributed AI will do 100% of the work, right? And so, like that truly changes the dynamic. And there was an MIT paper that came out last year saying, oh, there's a lot of things that humans can do that AI can't. Like it can have empathy and it can and have taste and all these things. I'm like, you're just basically telling the AI companies what to build next year. And like at the end of the day, if Tilly Norwood, the famous AI actress, could be sort of taught to be the best realtor, like why isn't she doing every transaction?
And I think the question we actually should be asking then is how fast that's going to happen. So I've been talking about this reshuffling of the economy. I still think we may end up in the future you're talking about where 0.1% are the only ones operating in the market. I just think it's going to take a really long time to get there. And it's going to take so long to get there, we're going to have forgotten about this podcast in the meantime. So that's all I mean.
Thank God it'll be digitally recorded forever. So
There'll be an AI, then there will be an AI version of Jeremy doing Housing Insiders. Um, but I think that's kind of what I'm getting at is this panic that we're addressing, this panic in the industry is bumping up against a timeline that I think is where you and I disagree, but I also think it's where the action is. Are you in the 2-year camp, the 10-year camp, or the 20-year camp? And if you are a CEO making decisions, then the 2-year camp or the 10-year camp is a life or death decision for your organization, for your company today.
if you've been following the news, you'll see that Built just made a major announcement. Built has just launched a new version of its award winning credit card, the Built Card 2.0. Not only does the new card let people earn points on rent without a transaction fee, but it now allows borrowers to earn points on their mortgage. Two things that are important to know. First, you'll never pay a transaction fee when you pay your rent or mortgage on the card, but you're only going to earn points if you use the card on other things. In fact, if you spend as much on other things as you do on your mortgage or rent, you'll actually get 1.25 points for every dollar on your mortgage and rent. Second, and important for us in the mortgage industry, is that the card technically functions like a debit card when it's used to make mortgage or rent payments. So it never uses a credit line. It's like paying with ACH, but earning points. The demand for the new card is off the charts. And that's because for most people, it offers the most amount of value of any card in the industry. And also, don't forget, the card is only a small part of what Built offers. Built manages payments for 1 in 4 apartment buildings and is now connecting with mortgage servicers like UWM to take mortgage payments. For all of these renters and owners, they'll earn points on every payment. And for all of our members, whether or not they have the card, they'll have access to benefits and rewards at tens of thousands of merchants in their neighborhood, like restaurants, fitness centers, pharmacies, and more. I think the fundamental question about the timeline is not whether or not it can be done, because I think we agree that the answer is it can be done. The question is, does it get done?
Does it get
And
done? Yeah.
that to me is the fundamental question, then boils down to, well, what's not letting it get done? And that's where I come back to these things. It's like, regulatory barriers to entry, data that only one company can access. Again, like MLS data, right? Only you have to be a licensed broker. To be a licensed broker, you have to sign all these contracts that you're going to operate this certain way. Only listings are going to go through that. So that's a barrier that if that barrier didn't exist, the world that we're talking about is next year. But that barrier does exist. The question is how long. And by the way, we're just talking about one part of our industry, right? Like this discussion could be mirrored in literally, I'll just throw out another one just to add to the conversation. Okay. FICO does not hold a patent on the best credit models in the world. They don't. They have a few things in their favor. They have access to data that a lot of companies don't have. So they have a data access thing. They have an infrastructure and switching costs thing, which is it's embedded in all these systems already today. Changing costs are high for everybody involved, right? It's not the best, but the system protects it. And even another score is the same fucking thing. Like, oh, well, we can't change that. It's going to cost all this money. But again, this is protectionism, and AI could build a better credit model. It could build a less biased, better credit model. It could build a model that every investor and every part of the ecosystem would prefer over FICO. It could do that today. It's not going to do that forever.
Yeah.
And it's these barriers that we set up as an industry that make it impossible for any of these things to get done.
So let's talk about this. So we've been able to react to this paper and we've been able to basically react and respond to what we've been hearing from the industry this week around both AI and the loss of jobs, specifically white collar jobs, but really all jobs to agentic AI, we've been able to respond and react to that. So now what you're saying is let's go one step further and say, let's get realistic here. Let's get practical. What are the incentives and where do the incentives lie? Just because this exists, somebody's got to pick it up and run with it. And then they have to distribute it. And then it has to get adopted. And then that adoption has to be profitable. And I think we're at the incentive phase right now. We are seeing an incentive for, I'm just going to use an example outside of our industry, an incentive for a stock trader to read this research paper and sell off SaaS stock because they have a conviction, right? Because they have a conviction about what SaaS looks like in a year, I think is a very different decision than the CEO of a real estate company or a mortgage company having a conviction about what you said and then reframing their entire organization around that conviction. And so that's kind of what we're talking about. We saw the sell off from the trader because the incentive is high and the stakes are low. I'll just buy it back if I need to and make my money somewhere else. But on the fundamental restructuring of your business, that I think, where's the incentive to do that? And once we see that start shifting, and that's why I brought consumer shopping in so early in the conversation, because I'm like, if that changes, the incentives could follow. If it changes more slowly or doesn't change, to your point, then we won't see a lot of downstream following. So an example would be MLS, you mentioned. MLS likes to pretend that it's a public listing, that once it hits the MLS, it's considered public. That's not actually true. So these are private organizations who have made it public only because of the amount of memberships and subscriptions that they can sell. It's basically public, right? But that's the type of change that now the incentives change downstream when somebody finds a way to unlock all of that data outside of the barriers you mentioned. So I know that took us there at the end off of a little tangent, but I just wanted to bring it up because we haven't really seen the incentives change, right? You could automate all this stuff, as you said, and we haven't seen it. So we need to see incentive structures change before we can be worried about a massive adoption of technology like we've never seen before.
Yeah, I agree. If the incentives truly were aligned in favor of lowering costs for consumers and increasing housing access, we would have a completely different industry than we do today. And I think every turn you look, the incentives are not in that direction. The incentives are to protect and avoid change like the change that you mentioned. And I hate to say that. It's so negative to say. I feel like really bad, but that's our industry is a protectionist industry. That's
I
it.
just climbed down off my soapbox here, so I'm back at street level. My question for you is: you've always said that it's the capital markets that drive it. It's the investors, and it's the promises made to investors from aggregators like Fannie and Freddie, from the rating agencies, this and that. So, I guess maybe what we should be asking is the same question you and I have been asking for years, which is if we can't drive that much incentive change from consumer side, have you seen anything or what gives you any conviction that there is a change to incentives, if any, on the investor side?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, and the investors would really drive that, but their incentives are different. Their incentives are clear, consistent, unchanging securities they can invest in and predict the outcomes of. That's their incentive. And they're not going to say like, "Oh, yeah, we'd love for you to use new tools that are going to change the data we get, or they're going to change the ability we have to protect those securities." Like that is possible to do. I just like, do investors really care about that? I just don't think. I think they just don't want. They don't want to be bothered with it. Maybe I'm wrong.
No, I think they are the liquidity. I mean, they are the liquidity that makes 75% of the housing market operate from a purchase perspective, right? And almost all of the refi market operate. So if we really wanted to think about what would deliver any benefit or incentive to that industry, then what is AI doing to do that? And that I think, because that was the promise of blockchain, by the way. The promise of blockchain, when it first came out, was supposed to be data integrity from the source of that data all the way through to the security, such that the investor would recognize the savings of no more due diligence because the data integrity is verifiable and true. That's just one example. There's several others that were supposed to be investor friendly and never materialized. Excuse me, I'll take that back. Have not yet materialized. There are people working on this, but the investor
Yeah.
community hasn't seen it yet enough that they've transferred it through to the primary market, maybe with the exception of second liens, but even that is pretty nascent.
Yeah, well, your point about second liens, just to highlight that, the securitization platform that Mike Cagney has built at Figure is 100 times better than the securitization platform that the GSEs provide to investors, right? But investors aren't going to use it and the GSEs aren't going to adopt it. And what's going to happen is if somebody even asks the question, like, why shouldn't we be doing this? The answer that you'll get from the GSEs is like, you can't really trust that new system. It doesn't have the years of experience and technical expertise and underwriting standards that we've built over time that you trust. And that is grade A fucking bullshit fear mongering, which tells me that what you're in the business of is no longer risk management, but it is rent management. You are keeping your money pot here of getting money from this thing, and you're not letting other people come in and change it. But I think you're right. Look, there are better ways to do this. AI could make it even better. Somebody's got to make the choice to make the change. Anyway, sorry. Now I'm going to step off my soapbox.
The only thing that I see that offers some access in this area would be a rep and warrant, that somebody wants to build AI that they believe they can get coverage for such that they can indemnify against certain losses or certain types of data integrity issues. I haven't seen it yet, but that's what pops to mind. Now, again, we're responding and reacting to this paper, and so part of this, I'll be honest, John, it feels partly like a brainstorm because what we're saying is, hey, look, we've heard your fears, but we've also heard this before. And so these things that aren't going to change are actually really strong, particularly in our industry. And so now at least we have a mental framework that works for me, which is the consumer incentive shopping has to change above and beyond the emotional feeling. And if it does that, then it will flow down the typical funnel in a new and different way that totally disrupts how the primary market operates around real estate and mortgage. Or a model that is protectionist to some degree to the rights of the investor and the return of the investor would guarantee them data integrity such that the production coming in gets a much faster, more elegant execution, and then real change happens. I don't see it happening in the middle.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, most of these things aren't eroded overnight. They're eroded over a long period of time. And in our protectionist economy, the erosion takes place as long as it takes for a river to create a valley. It just takes bit by bit, piece by piece. But in some cases, and this is the question that I've been sort of asking myself, in some cases, there's like a threshold that we break through where everybody has to look around and radically change what they're doing. And my thinking is like, I think you're right. Like consumer choice, that's not something that changes very quickly. It changes bit by bit, and like you slowly change taste, and slowly things get traction. Slowly things change. Like there are other parts, like features, workflows, aspects of things can slowly be changed and taken over. So, like to your point, like maybe a rep and warrant piece can get changed by like slowly gets eroded by call it feature set or products, and like one workflow gets automated and another workflow gets automated, and that kind of continues to generate. But is there a moment in which AI can kind of create a breakthrough? And do we have it? Is there a choice that we need to make as an industry? Is there it's like a regulatory choice, or is there something that we should be doing to say, look, what we do sucks and is expensive, is not good for consumers. What we need to do is rethink. I don't know who makes that choice, who has the pen on that, but like, is there a threshold change that could be made that AI now enables us to make that we can choose to do as an industry?
I think the thing that I've been thinking in answer to that question is what does AI allow us to shine a light on and measure that we were unable to measure before? And an example that I'll throw out there, even though I risk derailing us with too many specifics about the example, but I'll give it a shot, which is we've always thought certain models are probably better And then the data science and data modeling has been really expensive. But if you could run scenarios in an environment where all of the variables are measured and explainable and documented inside a tool that lets you run not 1,000-year flood, but 1,000,000 iterations of 1,000-year flood, and then see what that tells us about property risk in this area, pricing in this area, likelihood to repay in this area. Haven't we really just accelerated ways of proving the thing we want to do next? That I do think has some value. I don't know if that's a product, if that's a company, or if that's even going to be trusted by the gatekeepers you mentioned, rating agencies and others. But I think that's one way where we could radically change things that are cornerstones of this industry. I'll give you an example of a cornerstone of this industry: down payment. Down payment, LTV, is a cornerstone of the industry. Does it matter? Or is it emotional? Is it irrational that it matters, right? If I know precisely what a property costs every day, what the market value of a property is on a daily basis, and I know the cash flow of the household on a daily basis, do I need a down payment to put them in that house? I would say no, because the skin in the game is the model. The skin in the game is the housing payment. The skin in the game is the transition costs between houses. But that would be an example of we've never, as many times as you and I have tried, we've never gone down the path of really fundamentally challenging down payment without some offsetting subsidy or insurance policy that still kind of winks and nods at risk instead of actually looking at the risk.
I get your point of what you're saying is like we can question things a little, potentially a little bit better with AI. But let me give a counterexample. Appraisals on purchase transactions are fucking bullshit. 95% of the time, they're the purchase price. We have drones, we have technology that can go analyze appraisals. And honestly, like I am starting to be convinced that the combination of a drone and AI is infinitely better than an appraiser going and looking at the home. Like I personally, as a risk taker, would prefer that. And by the way, that's only going to get better, but it's pretty damn good now. And that's not a change that we've been willing to make. The data shows it time and time again. We're not doing it.
Yeah, here's what I would say. Like, interior of a house is a tricky thing to get access to. So quality and condition has reigned supreme for years because getting inside a house is tricky even for AI. What I think you're suggesting is actually, what if we had a better way to get inside the house? And then what would follow would sort of be the rest of it, rather than what today is a risk model of age, maybe roof age, square footage, and has anything visually changed, right? Because homeowners don't want to help you with this problem. That's the bottom line. It's not my problem. I don't want to help you with it. You guys figure it out, industry. And so those pieces of friction that you're talking about are really great examples. How do I deploy AI in a way that gathers that information and makes that decision? That's really the question. And it's tricky
Yeah.
because now you got to get
Yeah.
inside a physical space. But can we imagine, could we have spend the rest of the podcast rolling out an AI idea that would address that? Maybe. But then what's the incentive and the adoption to use it? To your point, what do I get? What do I get for it?
Yeah. And who's protecting that?
Yeah. And I still see caution around these panicked articles, and especially people making panicked business decisions around this without a clear picture of what's the incentive in adoption.
Yeah. Well, I can pay somebody $50 on DoorDash to go in and take pictures of an interior of a house. And I can use AI to look at those photos and figure out what the condition is. That I can do that today. Are we going to adopt that? Are we going to overcome the sort of fear mongering of like, oh, unless it's a real appraisal from an AMC, like that sort of stuff? Like, look, I mean, I'm not an expert at every part of this industry, but I feel like that is the most prevalent way of responding and reacting to these sort of advancements in technology that has been time and time again proven to be true. And I'm going to pivot a little. I just want to make one other point too about the sort of frictions in our industry that make it hard to do anything. Okay, because I think it's in all of this discussion, right? Because like an appraiser should go out there with their phone and take pictures and use an AI thing to do it, but like they don't have it. you've got to change their whole way of acting and way of being. Lenders have to change their process. So I want to talk about adoption because you mentioned that. So I have never heard a single person in the industry say, I love working with Encompass. It is my favorite tool. It is incredible what it can do. I've never heard that. Have
Me
you?
neither. No, I've never heard that.
Okay. It is like always described as a necessary evil. Are there better tools than Encompass? Probably. Are they adopted? No. And I think there's just such an immensity to the change cost of moving platforms. And look, there's examples of this in every part of our business, but like there are these just embedded technologies that even though they're not great and AI could do it better, the change cost is pretty enormous. It's sorry to just kind of throw that out there, but I wanted to mention sort of the other sort of meaningful friction, which is even employer behavior, people that work at companies that would much rather use a different and better tool. The time it takes to align a company to switch from an existing bad tool to a tool that's AI empowered or AI enabled is pretty insurmountable.
I actually want to use that as more of a conclusion for me on this, John, because I think you got at, by using those examples, I think you got at this answer for me. I've already laid out kind of how I'm thinking about where the incentive and the change comes from. My conclusion now, thinking through the threat in these articles, is we make way more irrational choices than we thought we did. And we lie to ourselves and say that we're not doing it. And I think there is an unmeasured value to having an expert like an appraiser look at something, even if they weren't in the house, to look at data and say, hey, 80% of this we don't have to look at, so I didn't. 20% of it got flagged. I signed off on it, right? The exact same way we do it with very complex systems like the human body. who who needs to be looking at this and why, and elevating that. And I think people will still pay for that for a really long time, is my point. So those experts who have tools wrapped around them, we're going to see AI rushing to assist the expert way faster in our industry. I'm just talking in our industry. I know I brought up healthcare a second ago, but in our industry, we're going to see AI rushing to help everyone along the way that you described earlier, rather than displacing in the next foreseeable future. And that's okay. But that is what's going to happen because we're not going to elevate the incentive that I mentioned earlier. We are going to empower the experts, and we're going to watch that compression of the top 10% or top 20% of the market is going to keep doing more of the business until it's 0.1%, but it's going to take 25 years.
25 years. I think that's sound. I'm going to take a counterpoint just to make a radical prediction here, because I think the way we're set up is very, very good at protecting what we do. It's just so good. And it's just going to be so hard to overcome for all the reasons we've talked about. And I feel very much like we're coming to the conclusion we did at a very early episode when we were talking about the NAR settlement and saying, what are things going to look like 2 years from now, which is roughly now. And we said probably the same. And that's basically where we are. I don't want to make that prediction because I have become... I was always optimistic about AI, but I am now a true all in. This thing is really going to change the world in a way that we're not prepared for. And the reason I say that to preface this is that the obstacles we're talking about overcoming and the exposing of the stupid way that we do business and the way that we could do it better and the change cost of getting to a better place, the strategy and everything. AI is not at the point yet where it can sort of really proactively say, if you want a better housing system, here are the steps to getting there. But it might in a year or two. And then it will really make us have to ask ourselves the question, are we here to make lives better for consumers, to increase access to affordable housing, or are we here for our paychecks? And I think consumers, the more they see that and the more information AI generates, it's going to be really hard to justify the things that we do today. I don't know how AI does it exactly. I'm sort of like, just postulating some possible ways that AI now proactively says, if you want a better housing system, this is what you do. Or even says, I will do it for you. You don't like using Encompass because it has these problems. I will completely change your entire stack, give a written list of instructions to my agents to go use the stack, and I will do it all for you without you having to make a change. The choice is yours. And that we're not there yet, but I think we will be there in the next couple of years.
So if I heard you correctly, the key question is, does AI replace Encompass, Or does AI replace the person logging into Encompass? And now we just have agents logging into Encompass, and somehow Encompass fucking made it through again.
That's right. We'll ask AI the meaning of life, and it'll come back and say encompass.
That's a good microcosm. I think that's a good microcosm because we'll be coming back to this topic, I'm sure, this year. We wanted to react and respond to everything we heard from our network. Like you, we were sent these articles over and over again. What does this mean? How should we be thinking about it? I hope we sparked some ideas around pieces and parts of this industry. If you heard something today and you said, go deeper on this, we want to do that. Come on the show and we will talk about it, because this, to me, John, is where we're actually going to get some really key strategic decisions, and they're going to have to be made dynamic in real time as you watch your business unfold. So to me, that's the message I'm taking away. And I thought this was a really good process for me to get my mental map of how to approach it.
Yeah, same here. And I also will just encourage listeners that if you're skeptical about what AI could do, just try it. I mean, I think that's what these articles are trying to say is like, think about it, try it. We've got to have this discussion. And if I'm right that this really puts us at a position as an industry where we have to choose better lives for our consumers or better paychecks for us, if that's really the choice that AI is forcing us to make, we got to talk about it. We all have to talk about it. We have to figure out how we work together to make this system better and work better for people. And I think it's a conversation worth having. So thank you all for listening. We will be back again in a couple of weeks as usual. Really appreciate it if you would click on subscribe. And this is hopefully an interesting episode meant to spark conversations between you and other colleagues. So please forward it along to other people who you think might be interested.
Thank you for listening. Share. And as John said, review the podcast. It helps us make more of these episodes. Thank you, as always, to Keenan Chen for the music.